Welcome to this episode of Into the Pages, where we go into our favorite books. Maybe not just our favorite books, we go into books to see if they're our favorite books. We're starting a new series, A Shadow of What Was Lost by James. I already forgot his name. Yep, James Islington. Somethington. So far, this book has been super good. We're super drawn into it. So join us as we go into the pages.
All right, first impressions.
This book has an insane start, in my opinion. I feel like there was 1,000 different things that were like just little hooks that were just like, oh, I'm going to get you there, I'm going to get you there, and I'm going to get you there. And the prelude just doesn't help anything. It's one of those mysterious preludes that's just like, what is going on?
Yeah, it's definitely one of those very kind of confusing ones. You have no idea. It's mentioning characters and places and things, and you have no idea what's going on. But at the same time, it seems like it's important, and we're not clear if it's the past, future, present, different dimension.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Because
so far, nothing that's happened in the prelude or prologue matches what we've read so far. So,
yeah, so it totally is one of those things that this could be, there's been mention of like a war going on, so this guy could have been like during the war 15 years ago, or the war like 2,000 years ago that they mention a little bit in these chapters as well. And we just have to slowly figure things out.
yes. The first thing right off the bat that I really like is I've noticed something about myself. I'm not the biggest fan of the chosen farm boy beginning. I know it happens a lot in different types of ways.
I would think that's why it's kind of like, it's one of those things that feels like it's kind of overdone.
Yeah,
and it's kind of rare where it's done really well.
Yeah, because I think it's hard to take a farm boy who knows absolutely nothing and make him a hero of something without there being some sort of spoon-fed greatness given to him. And I think it takes a lot of skill and patience in order to make it work. I think one of the best examples of the chosen farm boy working is the Wheel of Time. You have the whole Emmonsfield people, but they all go through this journey, and they're all growing. And even by the end of the book, the end of the series, they're still not really amazing heroes. They're really good, and they all accomplish like really great things, but they're not like some shining chosen one that just automatically like knows everything. And the worst example I can think of is Terry Goodkind and Richard. It just
with
seemed
the sort of truth.
Yeah, Richard, it just seemed like every turn. So he was a farm boy, but everything that he faced, he was like way too level-headed and like cool about it. And like, I remember as a kid reading it, and it was really awesome. I definitely recommend the series to anyone. But I think those are two sides of a coin of what it's like to have the chosen farm boy. So what I like about this start is we're just kind of thrown in. We meet our main character, Davian, however you want to say it, Dav. And he is something called a gifted. We don't quite know, right off the bat know what that is, but
there's like little clues in here and there. Like we get little hints at like, okay, the gifted are like the magic users of this world.
Yeah. They can wield something called essence.
Yes.
But it seems like, I'm just kind of jumping all over the place. I'm not really going to go in sequential order. Everything we talk about today is going to be about the first 5 chapters.
Oh yes, by the way, chapters 1 through 5. Well,
so that's what we'll be talking about, but not necessarily in sequential order. So basically, the gifted can use what's called essence, and it's their magic. But he's a gifted, and it kind of seems like the gifted are chosen randomly, like it just happens. So it kind of reminded me of like those of you who've read Elantris. It seemed very similar to being chosen to be an Elantrin. It just kind of happens. But anyway, once it happens, there was this. I'm getting ahead of myself.
Are you?
So I want to back up. So the story starts about 15 years after this great coup / war that happened between gifted and non-gifted people in a kingdom called Andara. And the gifted and the whole government was run by a group of people. I think there was about 6 of them, called the Augurs. And they were kind of like these magical people that had certain abilities, but they were really tight-lipped, really secretive about what they could do and what they couldn't do. And then something happened where they kind of started losing control. They started getting greedy. The gifted were like kind of like their right hand / enforcers, and they kind of had like a free reign to like use this power however you want. And so basically, it set up this kind of tyrannical environment where the people just hated it. And so there was a coup. The augurs were all killed. A lot of the gifted were also killed, and there was a treaty made. It's a magical treaty.
This treaty it's
pretty intense.
It's way intense. It seems more tightly knit than any other like magical treaty I've kind of
It's
ever heard
very
of.
obviously made to subject the gifted
Yeah.
and to force them to stay down. And it was obviously born out of anger, a desire for vengeance, and fear.
Yeah,
And
it
that
was not
comes across
like
very
it
clearly.
was not something made to make things an even playing field.
Yeah, like Davian, like Dav. I'm just gonna call him Dav. His nickname is Dav. His friends call him Dav. I'm just gonna call him Dav, or maybe I'll say Davian. I don't know. I don't care. Neither should you. But anyway, I forgot what the freak I was gonna say. Oh yeah, but so this is like I said, about 15 years after that had happened. So I don't even think Dav was alive when this war happened. And it's one of those things where not a lot of gifted that are currently around were alive then because of the persecution and death. But anyway, this treaty, essentially, there's a lot to it, but there's essentially 4 tenets that are very important and that are magically enforced by this contract by anyone who's a gifted. And how it works is when you become a user of essence, and like I said, it's not something that you're necessarily like you're born a kid and then you're like you're a gifted. It kind of seems like you go raise a little bit, maybe or go through a little bit of your childhood, and then something happens. For a lot of people, it's like some sort of traumatic experience that makes you use essence. Kind of had of Harry Potter vibes, when the wizards in Harry Potter first use magic. Sometimes it's under stress.
Wasn't there something else? There was some other book that I feel like did something very similar to that, where it was like,
yeah, Mistborn.
oh, okay, yeah, that's totally what I'm thinking about. And that's
Yeah.
why like Elend was
The beaten, yeah,
tortured by his
it
own
was
dad.
common for the noble families in Mistborn to put their children in serious life-threatening situations to see if they would manifest powers.
Yeah, that's totally what I'm thinking of.
So it kind of seems similar to that. I don't think that's how it's necessarily built, but just the nature of this world, we'll get into it more. That's kind of what happens. And that's kind of what happened to Dav. It doesn't really go into a lot of details, but he says that he just kind of remembers. Well, it seems very traumatic for him. Like, people kind of treat him like, man, are you okay? Like, this, like, kind of treat him like carefully. He has a pretty gnarly scar on his face, and it just makes it seem like a group of people did something to him that made him manifest essence. And when that happens, you get a tattoo on your forearm, and I forget exactly what it looks like, but it's basically like a man, a woman, and a child, I think, in like a circle. And it's like very prominent, like and as soon as that tattoo appears on your skin, the treaty takes hold of you, and you're bound by the tenets, which I thought was pretty clever writing from James. I think it's pretty cool, interesting that a magical contract didn't just control the current gifted, but guaranteed that all future gifted would also just automatically.
Yeah,
be
this one
subjected to this.
definitely seems like there would be a way for in other books for magic users to be born and then kind of like stay under the radar because they grow up under the new laws where magical beings and magic use is prohibited or illegal or of some sort.
Yeah.
But yeah, this one definitely is kind of like, oh, you're gifted? Well, get ready for a crap life.
Yeah, and it's not something you choose. Like, it just happens,
Yeah.
and then you're instantly shunned. There is a part where it's mentioning children that are so when you manifest this, you're required to go to a school, and in this school they kind of teach you and train you and control you there. It almost feels like a borderline concentration prison camp.
Seriously.
But the people within it are they're close, and they kind of have like familial bonds, and they form relationships. Like Dav has a couple friends, Asha and he gets along with like the elders and the masters and things like that. And so there seems like that, and he's in a smaller place, and so that definitely is an item of that. But something I thought was interesting about that we already talked about. That's what I thought was interesting about this treaty, is that it was just as soon as you could use essence, the treaty was enforced upon you. And the 4 tenets are, and I thought it was interesting and important to go over. So the first one is they can't use the gift with the intent to harm or hinder a non-gifted. The second one is they can't use the gift to deceive, intimidate, or otherwise work to the detriment of a non-gifted. And administrators, and we'll get to who they are in a second, administrators and gifted can do no harm to one another, and the gifted have to obey the administrators. So you can see it's very heavily leaned towards subjecting and subduing the gifted.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that's got me so intrigued, because they're treating these gifted like they are just the worst. They're treating them like they're evil, and the second they can do whatever they want, they're going to use their abilities to just wreak havoc. And it doesn't seem like I kind of hate real laws like this, that it just seems to like they don't give anyone a chance. It's like, oh, you're part of this group, or I say you're part of this group, so therefore there's all these rules that you have to follow, even though you had nothing to do with the reason these rules are here. So it makes me curious. It's like what in the heck happened 15 years ago in this little, I think they called it a rebellion at one point. What happened in this rebellion years ago that like made all of the non-gifted people so hateful towards the gifted?
I don't know I don't remember anything talk about a rebellion. I do. Because the augurs and the gifted were like the rulers of the kingdom for a lot of years.
It was,
and then there was a coup. There was like a military commander who led a coup.
It was like one sentence thing, and barely I would find it, but I have no idea where it is.
Maybe it was talking about like
it was talking about, I swear it said something about like the royalty rebelling. So maybe it wasn't a rebellion, they just said the royalty rebelled or something like that.
Yeah, but I don't think it was the gifted rebelling against anybody. They were the ones in charge. And
No. I'm saying like the people rebelled against the gifted, and the augurs is what I got anyway when I read whatever sentence this was.
Fine. So yeah, and we're kind of giving it all like up here at front. But what I really liked about this story is we kind of get thrown. So this is kind of the environment that Dav is born into, and he has been gifted for about, I think it's 6 years, 8 years, 6 years,
something like that. Do we know? I don't remember how old he is. Was he born within the last 15 years? Is he just a young and teenager?
So he was born after the 15 years. I think he's a teenager. I don't know exactly how old.
He's younger than I was thinking then.
Yeah. I don't know if it explicitly says there. If it does, I don't remember. But it's been at least 6 years that he's been at this school, and they're called Tolls. And he lives at the Caladel. I think it's Toll Caladel. Or maybe it's called something else, but the town he lives in is Caladel. And so that's kind of where we're thrown in. Just kind of give you an idea of this world that he's in. He becomes a gifted, which means he's immediately the lowest of the low. He's forced to obey all these tenets and rules by the treaty. And on top of all of this, he has to pass what's called trials. It's really unclear what these trials are, but our story kind of begins around that moment. And it also begins with, we see what happens both if you break the treaty and if you fail your trials. And it's called being turned into a shadow.
Which it's still pretty harsh to be turned into a shadow. It seems that because like we learn a little bit later that shadows are actually like the low of the low of the low. Like
even though they are like mistreat them.
It's insane how hated they are. I'm surprised they even have them around, because it seems like they wouldn't be able to survive at all. It's also pretty unclear right now what happens to you when you're a shadow. We know that it like takes away your ability to use essence, and like you get these black veins, but what else does it do to you? And if you have the gift or essence taken away from you, why are they still hated even more than the gifted?
I don't know. Yeah, it's hard to say, but they definitely are very hated. And so after the prologue, we get that kind of confusing stuff where we're thrown into Dav's position. He's being summoned to witness someone being turned into a shadow, and the witness is like, oh, it's required that someone witnesses it, but it's obvious that it's supposed to be like a fear tactic. Like they want students to witness so that they know what will happen if they break the rules. and there's this boy that got caught leaving the school without a shackle on him. And so what a shackle is it goes all on your forearm and it blocks your use completely of essence. You can't use it at all.
Yeah.
And you also have to have permission from the administrator. Administrators are kind of like the new bureaucrats, I guess, if you could say, like lower level government officials. They kind of took over, and it also kind of seems like they have magic of their own. I'm not. Well, no, I don't. No, I take that back. I don't think they have magic of their own. But the fourth tenet, the gifted have to obey the administrators. There's one point where Dav has to go into town to get supplies, and so he gets his shackle, and the administrator, Talion, I think his name is, Talion.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. He says, I invoke the fourth tenet that you have to return when you're done. And there's like this tingling sensation, and then Dav in his thoughts thinks, and kind of telling us readers that since he invoked the fourth tenet, he's going to be forced to obey. He's going to have to do it no matter what. And it kind of made me think of El Enchanted. Have you seen that movie?
Yeah, but I don't remember what part you're specifically talking about.
Oh, it's just the whole premise of the movie where Ella's cursed to.
Oh, I was totally thinking of the wrong one. I was thinking of just Enchanted, not Ella Enchanted. Well, okay, well, yeah, no,
Yeah.
like they literally say freeze and she stops in the middle of the air. That one.
Yeah. That one.
Okay, yeah. Which
Anyway.
that's I don't know why that strikes me as like so interesting, because I mean, we've read plenty of books where like they weave some sort of spell and to force someone to do stuff. But I mean, like, okay, let's take Harry Potter for example. There's the
Unbreakable Bond.
no, not the Unbreakable Vow. Unbreakable Vow.
Yeah.
It's one of the 3 forbidden spells.
Imperious Curse.
The Imperious Curse. Like, I mean, they talk about like, oh, you can and then that person does whatever you say, but then like it's used on Harry and he's able to break it. But like this, it seems like the fourth tenet, there is absolutely no breaking it. It's impossible. As far as we understand now, it really kind of, I think James really communicates really well. At least if that's what he wants to communicate, I think James communicates really well that like there's no breaking this.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's that. So Dav is summoned along with his friend and they go to witness this event. And basically what it is there's like this little trial where they say, hey, this kid. Like,
it's not even really a trial, really. It's more like a sentencing.
It's more sentencing, yeah, I would agree with that. Because they're basically saying, I think he got caught outside of school without a shackle on. And he got caught because he used essence. And they have some sort of magical technology called finders that if you use essence, it detects it and leads them to wherever the heck you are. And there's hunters that will probably kill you, or at least at the very least turn you in, and you'll be turned into a shadow. So there's really no escaping. And so what it is they have this weird, doesn't explain how it works, but they have like this weird black disc, and they put it on the back of his neck, and then they activate it, and then he like spasms and like convulses.
Yeah, they did. It seemed like they put some magic into it.
I think they did. Yeah,
but
they
don't
put it on his neck, and then they did something. They like, I think he said like light or essence passed. Like they do some sort of magical thing to it to activate it. I think you're right about that. And then like he's like, and like just freaking out.
Yeah.
And it's like super traumatic to see.
And I think part of the traumatic thing of getting this put on you is you know what's going to happen to you. You're like fully aware and stuff. But they say that he was like struggling, like, please no, don't do this. And he was bound, right? This Lee him or whatever.
Yeah, he was like tied up. With,
but like, and he tried to get away. But the second that thing was on her, he went rigid and was paralyzed, and like he could only move his eyes. So I think
yeah. And then
adding that to it, it just adds a whole new level of fear. Like when you are like in a position and you want to fight with everything you can and you can't. I think that adds just like you're like, oh.
Yeah. Yes. So. Yeah, and that's the whole process, and then it's just starting in your eyes, like these weird. I pictured it as tattoos, but I think it's described as it looks like veins, just really grotesque.
Yeah, that's what I viewed.
Really
it was
nasty looking, and
veins.
it just makes you like, ugh.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really bad punishment for 2 reasons. It kind of makes it's kind of implying, hasn't explicitly said this, but it's kind of implying that essence. Using essence is similar to using the true source in Wheel of Time. Like once you start using it, like it just feels really good. It like becomes part of who you like becomes part of you. It's like another limb. And so there's that aspect of getting cut off and then like never being able to do that again.
So I mean, like, okay, remind me a little bit. It's been a while since I've read Wheel of Time, but the true essence was almost like
True source.
true source was like a drug. Like you did it a little bit, but then you want to do more and then more and more. And eventually, like with the men at least, it drove him mad. Is that would you consider it kind of like a drug?
No.
Okay.
I would say because the men weren't driven mad. They were driven mad because now we're getting to will time. So the true source, there's like that. That's like the true source. It's like the life force of the world. It's what drives everything. It's like what makes time move and what makes the ages come and go. It's like the all powerful thing. And there's certain people, Aes Sedai, that can tap into and do certain things with it and access it. And there's a female version and there's a male version, and they're not the same. They're completely different, even though
Okay.
they're both accessing the true source. And the dark one tainted the males and the
I
male
totally forgot
half,
about
which is
that.
when they went to touch it, they described it as like they described it as it was like reaching, like when oil is on top of water. They described it as like reaching through the oil to get to the water, and the oil was what made them go mad and become corrupted.
Oh, okay.
Anyways, but the true source, like you're kind of hitting the point where there were definitely people who, because once you have the true source and you're channeling, you're just filled with that life force and that energy, and your senses are heightened, and like I guess you could describe it as drug like, just like how it feels.
Maybe not
and then,
necessarily
like,
the same way. It's just addicting, I guess. Like,
I think it can be because they're.
I mean,
Definitely
if we compare this again to like Harry Potter, like say you were Muggle born and you grew up for the first 11 years of your life, like magic and other such things of the fantasy world were fantasy, and then you finally like you get a letter from Hogwarts, like holy crap, I'm a freaking wizard, and I can like I'd be like I want to cast spells all freaking day, like
right.
that would be a whole new. It wouldn't be drug like, but it would definitely be like addicting. I'd be like would.
Since we're
not
talking
wanna
about Harry
do
Potter,
anything.
I have a random tangent to go on.
Wait
What?
a minute. I'm not done with my tangent.
Oh, fine. Finish your tangent.
But, so all I'm thinking is like that the essence is not necessarily a drug, but it's literally like what you kind of said. Like it's another limb. Like if you grow a third arm that works perfectly, and it's not like this gross thing hanging out of you, and you can like use it. You would use it.
Yeah.
And like if you're told you can't use that, it's illegal. You'd still be like,
Well, then they cut it off.
I want to use it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I viewed the essence. It's not necessarily
I
like a
can see
drug
that.
they can't resist using, but it's like, why wouldn't you want to use something that's
Yeah.
like
So
that?
there's that aspect, and then also becoming a shadow just makes you like a lot. I think later in the book it's kind of described as shadows are like, what's even the point of like I'm worthless, I have nothing,
Seriously.
and so
And they talk about, I think one of the, I forgot who she was, a teacher there at this school or some sort of leader at this school. She's like, I'll give him some money and send him on his way. It's like,
yeah. But even
but
then,
we learn
it's-
again later, like there's people who will like look at the shadows and be like, you can screw off. I'm not gonna.
Yeah.
I'm not. I don't
We,
care
we
what.
see
money you have.
exactly how bad it is because after this, the next day, in fact, Dav is sent into town because their school's like kind of up here, and they have to walk down a road to get to the town. And we kind of get a little glimpse on how intense the hatred and disgust and persecution towards the gifted is.
This is the part that made me think more of like the concentration camp. Like
Yeah,
this
'cause it's
feels like
just
the way that the Germans
the
treated
way
the
I think
Jews.
James did a really good job at just painting this. It's just like this world just seems so. Like if you're gifted, like kill yourself. Like it
Yeah,
just
seriously.
seems so terrible. It seems so awful. Like because he goes into town and Dav is thinking this whole time. He's like, even though the school is what's keeping these shops in business, they still are reluctant to do business with him. Like he mentions that he has to put his head down. He has to deal with any crap they put at him. And then he says there's some merchants that if he goes in there and someone else comes in, the merchant will yell at him to get the heck out, and he never wants to see him ever again. And he knows that means to just go
Yeah.
on back and wait until they come
It's
out
like
and
one
get
of those
him.
things. There was that, and there was also one of those like merchants don't want to sell to the gifted because if other customers see that they're selling to the gifted, then suddenly that shop or whatever
Yeah.
merchant is like, oh, don't go to that. They sell to the gifted. It's like
Yeah, so
I don't know
even though
any
the
other way to
school-
describe it, but
even though the
everyone
school
is
is the
super
very-
racist
Yeah,
against,
even though the school is the very thing keeping this little town by it
Yeah.
running.
which is so dumb.
Essentially, they have this persecution, and we also get a little view of how it's even worse for the shadows because he's in this butcher shop, and the butcher's he describes him as he's always been like one of the nicer merchants, like he's always been respectful and kind. But then this man who he described as respectful as kind sees a shadow And before the shadow like opens the door, hasn't even like barely put a foot in, and he just starts yelling. He's like, "Get out! We don't serve you!" And then the shadow's like, "Well, I just want to do it." And then he grabs like a cudgel and starts going after him, like he's gonna beat the crap out of him for just even stepping in his shop.
Yeah.
And so the shadow runs away, and I'm like, okay, so
that brings up something else that would be interesting to know. I think is that shadow didn't do nothing, right? He's just a shadow, and for some reason they're
he's just
lower than disease.
He's just a kid, which means he had nothing to do with the oppression that the gifted did.
Yeah, I think
so. It's just obvious that this treaty has made it so that the people around the gifted can enact vengeance and act out all their hate that they had built up towards these people when they were in power.
And the point that I was going to bring up is that the law is 100% against the gifted. It does not matter. The gifted could be a baby and someone could beat it to death, and then the law would be like, oh, that baby burped or cried too much, so it deserved, something. That's kind of a bad example since they have to be older, but like it literally doesn't matter.
There's a perfect example in here. So after Dav, he gets all his supplies and he's going to leave, and he gets surrounded by like a gang of guys.
And it wasn't even guys. They mentioned they were kids.
They were kids. Okay.
Because I remember that he said Dav was thinking to himself they looked like they were a year or so younger, something like that. They were younger than him, but there was a gang of them, and they were raised in this racist type.
And so
world.
like they surround him and they just start harassing him, like pretty extreme bullying. It seems like at first, and Dav he's just keeping his head down. He's just trying to leave. He's just being like really submissive, and like I just want to leave. I just want to get out of here. And then I don't remember if they punch him or just push him down and start threatening him. But it's clear. But Dav is very clear. He's like, I'm in like serious physical danger right now. Like they're gonna beat the crap out of me. And an administrator shows up. And an administrator is like, again, kind of like the bureaucrat of like the towns and stuff, and they're supposed to deal directly with the gifted. And the idea is that the administrators are supposed to protect gifted and like help them. But this administrator walks by and Dav is like, administrator, and the administrator just looks and then walks away, and then the kids continue to beat up on him. So it's just like, like you said, there's
no consequences.
And I think he even thinks like if there was any type of issue, if it involved a gifted and a non-gifted, it would just automatically go in the favor of the non-gifted.
Yeah.
And so
no matter the facts is what he said.
But he is saved though. There's an elder that comes in, Ilseth Tavor, I think.
I don't remember his last name, but I do remember Ilseth.
Ilseth comes and he kind of chases the kids away, and he's another gifted, but he's an elder. So to become an elder, there's the obvious use of the word where he's an older person, but he's past his trial and he's been around for a little bit, and he was actually around during the power and time of the augurs. And so him and Dav start to kind of talk a little bit, and this is when we start to get, we haven't mentioned it yet, but Dav, he has to face his trials in 3 weeks. This is kind of where we're at with the story, and he's really nervous about it because even though he's been training for 6 years, he can't use the gift. He can't use essence beyond what he did when it first manifested. He has for 6 years hasn't been able.
Do you remember what it was? What did he do to manifest? I forgot.
Hasn't said yet.
Oh, okay.
Because every time it mentions it, he's like, I just remember like he. Since we're in Dav's perspective, that kind of like the trauma takes over, and he like tries to move on to other things. But it's obvious that's where his scar came from, and he's like nervous to go by himself into town, and like he seems like something bad happened. Like maybe he got mobbed like he did before, and manifested then, because he worked at the school before he became a gifted, so he was persecuted even then just for working with them.
I think there's one thing that's important to mention before we go a little bit further. Dav is not able to use the essence to do anything, but he does have an interesting ability. Okay. He does have an interesting ability where if someone lies to him, he sees like, black smoke just come out of their mouth. Yeah. And but like it's something that he can only see and no one else can see it. And that is the only bit of magical ability we have seen from him is you literally can't lie to Dav because you're body does something, or I don't know what the story is. Why black? They can see black smoke, but I thought that was kind of cool.
It's pretty unique.
I don't know if I would. It's always been like one of those things where like say, oh, do you want to be able to read minds? Because you might be reading things in people's minds you don't want to hear, and blah blah. And like then it's like, oh well, you'll never be lied to, or whatever arguments. But like this is kind of a nice thing because
you'll just see black smoke.
he knows you're lying, and he doesn't have to do anything. He doesn't have to cast a spell on you, he just sees black smoke, and
Yeah.
which I think would be super cool because I personally think that'd be cool because I hate being lied to so freaking much.
And so, but it's like kind of a secret ability, because
Yeah,
it doesn't seem like it uses essence, and so there's kind of a sneaking suspicion that he may be an augur. And the rule is that if anyone, according to the treaty, if anyone manifests augur abilities, they're just immediately turned over to administrators, and it heavily implies that they're executed. I might even say that they're executed.
I kind of feel like it is because they don't seem to mention augurs at all, other than like in the past, like there were 6 augurs before. There's none now because they're all just killed.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like they talk about gifted here, gifted there, gifted her at the school, but yeah, augurs there's no mention of them at all in like present tense.
Yeah. And so, yeah, Ilseth, the elder, saves him. And kind of skipping back in the story a little bit, before Dav left for the town, he overheard conversations that there was something crazy going on and schools were being attacked. And when Ilseth talks to him, he recognizes Ilseth's voice as the one that he overheard.
Yeah, we didn't
That was
mention
kind of
that,
like an important part of-
before Dav went into town, he was walking past
the
the administrator's office and heard voices he didn't recognize because, yeah, they're a tight-knit group, as you said.
Yeah. And they mentioned several things that are important. They were looking for the boy, and they were talking about the craziness and then the attacks on other schools. And Dav was kind of like, oh, they're looking for me? Oh, crap. But anyways, he recognizes this as Ilseth. And Ilseth seems like a friendly guy, nice guy.
Yeah.
And they're talking.
Dav's able to, since Ilseth saved him, and they walk back to the school together, and Dav is able to grill him about lots of stuff that the elders, he says, just avoid.
Yes, I think the elders avoid it just kind of naturally, and there's also a treaty that specifically says that you can't teach or talk about certain things, and so
Classic oppression type of stuff.
But he is able to openly start asking about augurs, and then he learns more about who they were and what their abilities were, and he learns that some of them were able to use essence, and so he's like, oh, good. Maybe in these 3 weeks I can figure out how to do it. But then it comes out that the reason Ilseth is there is because his trials are actually tomorrow.
Yeah.
so
this would be so devastating. It's like learning that you suddenly just have to go to jail. That seems like worse. It's like you gotta be thrown through
you're going
a
straight
pit.
to the electrical chair, because it doesn't say what the trials are. It just says you have to pass your trials, but it doesn't say like what are the trials. Is it like, okay, make
I think the only thing we
a
can
staff
really
out of essence? Or
yeah,
like,
that's the only thing
5
we can
plus
kind of
4?
take. The only thing we can really take away is that the trials, you have to use essence. That's like all we
Yeah.
know.
And if you fail the trials, you're immediately turned into a shadow.
That is what is super harsh. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, it's kind of understanding that, oh, so-and-so broke the rules, so they have to be turned into a shadow, even though that is still in itself is super harsh. Especially since, like, that kid before, what did he do? We don't know that he did
He
anything.
kept running away.
He just ran away.
I think he ran away a few times.
He
and
didn't
this
like,
was kinda his
but
last
like the point
chance.
I'm making, he didn't go to like the farmers down the road and kill their chickens or their children or try to murder the fam. No, he just was cooped up or
Mhm.
something. I don't know. Wanted to get
Yeah.
out. So
He was essentially given a death sentence.
yeah. And now, but like, seriously, because a gifted person can't use essence, you're gonna make him a shadow? What is that? What the heck? That's so
And the
dumb.
tenants, especially because the tenants prevent them from doing harm to anybody.
Yeah. So what the heck?
And it's not like we'll agree to this. It enforces it. It's a magical contract. Like, you can't. And
yeah. So
it again, we've talked about this. It's just very obvious.
and I think that's what happened actually with the shadow guy who came into the butcher's shop that Dav went to. The butcher was nice but hated the shadow guy. And then Dav kind of was like, why do you hate him so much? He didn't even do anything. He just failed his trials. Like, he's not a criminal. He didn't steal. He didn't murder. He didn't anything like that could land you a horrible, miserable life. But yet he manifested his use of essence, didn't pass his trials, and now he's just screwed. And he's probably a teenager. Because, I
Yeah.
mean, Dav is a teenager.
It almost seems like the trials are like the coming of age for a gift.
Yeah. I
And
wonder if they're
so-
like, Dav's got to be like 14. Because if he was born, the oldest he could be is like 14, maybe like 15 if he was born the same year that the war ended or something. But
Curious now. I want to see if it says. I'll take too long to look up. But yeah, he is definitely very, very young.
I also kind of wondered if this was like what I would refer to as like a Jedi situation, where like the Jedi were a generally good people, right? They're the peacekeepers of the universe, but there was other Jedis who maybe didn't quite agree with the Jedi Order and its rules.
Well, so this, I think you're getting to a point that I think is very interesting, and this is jumping way ahead to like chapter 10, but I want to mention it anyway. It's just a little thing. But it turns out that, so this Andorra is a country, is a nation, and they're not the only ones with gifted. They're gifted in other countries, but this treaty affected all.
Oh,
gifted.
geez.
And there were countries that had no problem with gifted, and their gifted were all of a sudden subjected to the treaty.
Oh, man.
And had to abide by the tenets, like they were magically forced. And it's mentioned that those nations were so mad about that they wanted to go to war.
Yeah,
against
so
Andorra,
I was just going to say.
But couldn't, because the gifted made up the backbone of their armies.
Who the heck made these treaties? I want to find that out now. And
so
how the heck did they do that? Because like,
so that's even more so. Like, you don't even live in this country where these gifted were.
I couldn't imagine. That's like freaking.
And then all of a sudden, you're like, you're just in your garden picking some corn. All of a sudden, a tattoo shows up on your arm, and you can't.
Is that part of the treaty? I thought that everyone.
No, that's part of the treaty.
The treaty is like the treaty senses that you are gifted now, and then tattoos
as
you.
As soon as you use essence,
wow.
It's there, and it's even mentioned that when you become a shadow, the tattoo leaves.
Oh man, those poor shadow people. I don't understand why they're so hated. What did they do?
Exactly.
Is it just like this?
I think this
is. Like I think
this is how James wants us to feel. Like, what the heck? These people, like, okay, I get it. The gifted that you killed and the augurs you killed were evil and corrupt, but like these people, they're kids, and they didn't do anything.
Yeah,
they used to be your children. It's mentioned that the children that come to the school have to be like comforted and explained that their parents
like hate them,
abandoned them and hate them, and they're abandoned, but it's okay because they're here now and they're gonna be watched after.
I couldn't imagine.
And I'm like, man. That's crazy, but I think I love when I have this emotion when I'm reading a fantasy book because it makes me know that the author is just like, it's just getting it. It's just like really drilling it in. And so
which I actually want to mention this because I thought it was so crazy because I'm feeling the same way you do. Like, I am so drawn into this book because like I'm feeling real emotions about fake freaking characters and story and stuff. But what blows me away is you were telling me that this is James' like debut novel.
Yeah.
Like, holy flip. If I wrote a book...
Let me double check that, because I want to make sure that...
But I mean, like, even if this is, like, his fourth or fifth or something like that, like, if I wrote a book, everyone would be like, what the crap is this trash?
Yeah, I mean, Google, if you can trust Google, it says, A Shadow of What Was Lost is a 2014 Australian high fantasy novel, the debut novel by James Islington. So we'll just go with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, just off that alone, like, wow.
Pretty insane. I wonder if like he's maybe written. He must have. Like, I don't think you can't just crap out a good story like this.
Yeah, he's probably been writing.
I'm sure he's written for a while. I don't. Do you know how old he is?
I don't. Pictures of him, he doesn't seem super old.
I mean, like he could be like Christopher Paolini, where like he just is 18 and pulps out a book, and everyone's like, wow.
I've seen pictures of. He doesn't seem too old. I wouldn't put him past 40.
Okay,
but anyway,
yeah.
What the heck were we talking about? Yeah, so that's this crazy oppressive environment. And now he's faced with essentially a death sentence the next day. And
it's
totally
a terrible death
like
sentence.
he's just totally like, well,
I mean, like
I'm flipping screwed.
I think the way that I think about it is Dav's sentence is to be dropped in the middle of the desert with no food, no water, but lined everywhere in the desert is people selling food and water, but no one will sell it to you. So you have to sit there and just die slowly and painfully and watch all of these jerks just be like, oh, I've got water, but none for you. Like, get out of here, you piece of filth.
Yeah, seriously. Of course, Dav, he's just totally like wrecked. He's like, okay, I'm not gonna do anything. So he goes to his room and he's like, should I study? He's like, I'm not gonna really.
We didn't really mention earlier, but he has been studying like crazy, trying to figure it out. He's like studying so hard and so long that he only sleeps.
He's
like
a smart guy
hours.
too.
Yeah.
It's mentioned that I think he's like a top performer in the school. Like, he's really smart. He knows a lot. And he has a lot of academic knowledge, but he just can't use essence. And I think he even watches like new arrivals using essence and gets like a little jealous, and there's kind of a little bit of that going on. But yeah, so then it gets to the nighttime, and while he's sitting there on his bed kind of pondering and thinking, Ilseth actually comes and talks to him and essentially says that Dav is an augur. It's like, you're an augur. And he's like, oh, well, I do have this ability where I can like see smoke when I lie. And he's like, yep, you're an augur. And then it turns out that Ilseth is a part of, and this is when the story starts being like, wow, what the heck? Because I thought I was worried that it was going to turn into this thing. He's going to go to the trial, and then something was going to happen. Like, it was either going to be really terrible, and then he was going to be like, all of a sudden, oh, I used essence and barely squeaked by, or it's going to be like, he's about to go do the trial, and then something was going to happen. He was going to have to do the trials. But essentially what happens is Ilseth comes to him and he's like, you're an augur. I'm a part of this secret group of people.
Like 5 or 6 people.
That want the augurs to come back. And it seems really shady.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. I do not trust
And
Ilseth
I think an
at
important
all.
thing to also mention is that Ilseth was like, I forgot the name he used, but he was a type of gifted who was like the second in command to the augurs. Yeah. Like, or he was like his direct assistant servant to the augurs. Like,
yeah. So he was up there.
They did mention earlier too that like the augurs were like the lawmakers and the judges and all that stuff, and like the leaders in government, whatever. But the other gifted were like the people they sent out to enforce their laws.
Yeah,
I think that's another reason why. Like, it's kind of unfair. Like, I think a good example is like the government and our police. Like, the government makes all the laws, but the police are the ones who have to go out and enforce the law. So a lot of the times it's the people, the police are the ones that the people are like, oh, you're making me go the speed limit or not bash someone's face in, so I hate you, whatever. So that's one of the things why they hate the gifted.
I didn't think about that, but I think that's definitely a huge part of it, big part of it.
But anyway, that's why I think it's super important to know that Ilseth was like a direct assistant to the augurs. Yeah. One of them or something.
And so there's that, and he's saying that he wants Dav to run away. He's saying he wants him to leave, and he gives him very vague, like, you need to go north. And Dav, this whole time, didn't see any black smoke coming out of.
I think that's another part of it too that like is meant to mislead us. Like,
I think
somehow
he mentioned that people did try. Because Ilseth in his story earlier in the day was mentioning that some people did try to deceive augurs, and at one point, like, their powers were kind of fading. And so I wonder if there is a way to like lie, like maybe if you believe you're telling the truth good enough. Like,
because again, we don't know what causes them to see smoke. Like, is it an outright lie, or
he could be like a good guy and he's just a crazy zealot.
Yeah,
and he's just trying to do his best in a crazy environment. Like, it could honestly go either way. Basically, he gives Dav this it's called a vessel. It's essentially like a cube with like some things on it. It's like a magical artifact. And he says, you need to go north, and then when the time is right, you'll know it, and you need this vessel. And then Dav agrees to go. He's like, well, my choice is run away and die, run away, maybe get caught and die, face the trials tomorrow, maybe fail and die.
Most likely fail.
Most likely fail. And so, like, it seems like, and since Ilseth wasn't lying, he's convinced. And I can't believe we forgot, like, a super important part. So the reason this secret society exists that's trying to bring the augurs back is because apparently there's this magical barrier that's been set up.
They call it the boundary, right?
Oh, boundary. Okay, I couldn't remember.
This is where I think this story can almost get a little confusing, because there's 2 big wars it talks about. There's like this big war that happened 15 years ago that got all the gifted to be subject to. They
even say about that war though, they're like, it was called the war, but the slaughter was pretty one-sided. Like, it was a well-planned coup. Yeah, just like kind of in like almost.
That's another thing why I feel like it's like the Jedi, because it was like.
Yeah, because I think even Ilseth mentions like he was like sleeping or something, and then came out, and then he was like, all the augurs were dead, all the gifted in the palace were dead. It just like happened so fast.
Yeah, he said he was studying late one night, and then came, and like all the people who went to bed were just had their throats slit in the middle of the night.
Yeah, so there's that, but apparently a really long time ago, long enough ago that it's become like a myth and a legend.
I think he said,
because he talks about
closer to 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, and Dav is like, is that real though? And he's like, yes. And no smoke comes out, so he's like, oh dang. But basically, this boundary is essentially holding back. It was originally created because there was some person, I don't know why I want to say Demon King, but some really evil person that was taking over the world, and the boundary was created to kind of lock him in. And it kind of implies that he's not really around anymore, but the things he created
It
are.
did. Ilseth outright said that he's long dead, but the creatures he created or used are still around.
Yeah. Yeah. And he says that the boundary is weakening, and it's only the augurs are the only ones that can repair it. And so that's how he's able to convince Dav to go north and to find this secret place and train to become an augur so that he can help repair the boundary.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what helps him decide to go. And so after that, Ilseth says, "Okay, give me like 45 minutes, like 15. I don't know how long, 15 minutes to go and."
He said a quarter of an hour.
A quarter of an hour, so 15 minutes, 25 minutes, however long quarter hour, 15 minutes. So he goes. He's like, "Give me 15 minutes. I'll make sure the guards are distracted, so you can escape." And during that time, Wur comes.
Yes.
And he knocks on the door, and Wur's just being a good friend. He's just like, "Hey man, like I just heard the trials are tomorrow, like."
Well, he knew they were happening because like him and Wur and Asha spent the rest of the day with him for like his last moments type.
Oh, that's right. And I forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're like ready to send him to jail to be executed. He's not, or not even to jail. Like he's skipping that part and going right to the chair, as you said.
Yeah, and Dav's like getting ready to go at this point, and I don't remember exactly how it happens, but I think he just decides to tell Wur. He's like, "I'm leaving. Like I'm running away." And Wur's like, "No, you can't." And then he describes the whole situation.
He even starts with like saying, "Being a shadow's not so bad."
Yeah, and then he's like, he's probably thinking being a shadow's better than being dead.
Yeah,
but I don't think I agree with that.
I don't agree with it either.
But anyways, Wur at first tries to convince him not to go, but then he's like realizes he's going to go anyway, and so he's like, "Okay, fine, I'll go with you." And then that's kind of where we end that. Chapter 4, I think it is Dav and Wur pack up their stuff, their few belongings. Ilseth gave them a huge bag of gold.
Like a small fortune. I think Dad even is like, "I'll be able to feed myself forever." Like with this, like if I remember right, he said something like, "There's so much gold in this little bag that he will never want
feed
for
like
food."
A farm family for like a year or something like that.
Yeah, something crazy.
Yeah. So they have that. They go on the road and they never look back. And I remember thinking, I was like, "What about Asha? Like she's like the Hermione of this."
Yeah, if they were really as close as friends, I would have been like, "Well, if you're coming, what about her?" And if I would have been left behind like Asha, I'd have been like, "You sons of bees, come back for me."
But chapter 5 goes to Asha's viewpoint, and we find
crap.
out that at first I was wondering if it was just gonna like leave Asha in the dust, and we wouldn't really hear from her until maybe like second book or halfway through this book.
Yeah, but almost right
but
after
no,
that,
James gives us a quite juicy side view of her.
Kind of juice we don't want.
So chapter 5, we get into Asha's perspective, and it's kind of just like her waking up in the morning, and she's just kind of groggy and like, "Oh, poor Dav, like maybe I should go talk to him." And she rolls over and she's like, "Oh, my roommate's really quiet. She's usually like snoring or like stirs when I get up." And then she looks over and there's just like, she kind of touches her and she rolls over and her throat's been slit and there's blood everywhere.
Yeah.
And so of course she screams, she's freaking out. She's like, "Someone help, someone help, someone help." And no one responds. Like she's freaking out. She's like, "Someone should have responded." And she starts going in every
And they're in a dorm. They're not just like,
Yeah,
it's not
it's
like
like
she's
a
in a
dorm.
cottage
No,
3
like
miles
their
away
dorm
from
rooms,
campus.
like where you can hear screams easily. And she goes, and every room has slit throats.
Yeah,
dead
everyone's
people.
dead, or like their throats are ripped out, or necks
Yeah,
are
some
broken.
are so ripped out, like so violently ripped out, so you can see their spine. And I'm like, wow, this is like violent.
Yeah.
And like, one, how'd you sleep through that? But two, we'll get. Anyways,
I mean, I can understand sleeping through someone just going there and slitting a throat, but like if something, like what would rip out a throat? And like I don't know, I only have movies to reference, but if you get your throat slit versus ripped out, would you make noise with either one? I don't know.
It would be like,
yeah, you'd be able to do
or
that.
I guess where's your vocal cords? Is it like right here?
I have no idea.
Anyway, so she very quickly finds out that everyone in the school is dead, and she runs after, like, she kind of stumbles through the girls' dormitory. She's like freaking out, and then she has the thought, Dav and Wur, like, holy crap, are they dead?
It's what I think is even crazy to mention too is like it's not just the students. She runs past the teachers and like the guys that the elders we've been talking about. Like there was the cook who raised Dav. She's dead. There was the administrator that Dav tried to be like. Well, the administrator offered like, hey, I'll talk to the people, see if they'll put your trial back to normal so you can have time, and that he's dead, and
yeah,
everyone is dead,
everyone
except for somebody,
except for her,
okay,
Dav,
so
and
Asha.
Wur.
Yeah.
So she goes to their room, see that they're empty, And she's kind of relieved, and then she goes to like the administrator's office, and she gets wrapped up in essence. They're like, "Who the crap are you?" And she finds the 3 elders, Ilseth and 2 other elders that are there. And at first I was like, those guys killed everybody. But then it turns out that they were just sleeping in town. In a hotel.
That still struck me as suspicious. Like, would Gifted really be able to sleep in town? Was
she says that was normal. She's like,
oh, she did.
Yeah, I think even Dav mentioned that when elders come to visit from other tolls, they stay in town.
Oh,
I don't know why.
Okay, so
I don't know why they don't have
I thought that was
guest
super
quarters.
convenient. Like, oh, you guys will just happen to be in town.
It does kind of seem like James set it up that way, because
make it suspicious.
in this world of persecution and level of hatred, you would think that they would want to stay in guest quarters at the toll instead
Seriously,
of having to
like,
walk to town. But
anyways, I wouldn't have any, especially since they did mention earlier when Dav was in town that Ilseth also had a shackle. So they would be shackled, I assume, if they had to go into town. So who's to say the villagers are gonna be like, we don't like these gifted people, we're gonna go kill them. Like, especially since there's those little rotten kids who went after Dav for no freaking reason, and they were raised by parents who probably have much stronger feelings than that against the gifted. So it just seems like they might as well slit their own throats that night, because I would just think the townspeople would be like, these people are awful, they need to die.
But anyway, so she goes in there. They kind of start questioning her, like, "How are you so alive?" And she's like, "I have no idea what the frick is happening. Like, what's going on?" And then they make it's kind of like implied that this was a supernatural occurrence, and they're almost suspecting that it's one of the creatures from the boundary escaped. And then Ilseth is like, "How about you? I'll talk to the girl. You guys go and try to look for other survivors." And they're like, "Okay, unlikely." And then they leave, and then this is when Ilseth becomes even more shady. I want to read something, a direct quote, because I think this will come back.
Then I think what you're about to read definitely like shattered my trust in Ilseth.
Oh, I don't know. But so Ilseth is kind of questioning her. He's kind of asking like, what's going on, and then she mentions, I think Ilseth's the only one in the. I think she mentions whatever. She's like, I think Dav and Wur are still alive. And then he hands her a note. It was addressed to Elder Olin. It says, "Elder Olin, Davian and I have decided to leave at short notice on a matter of some importance, and one I believe needs my oversight. Send no one after us. Davian is under my protection. Please tell my father that if we are caught, I will use the name I used here. He can retrieve us both at his earliest convenience, and I will explain matters to him then." And it's signed Torin. So it seems very obvious that letters from Wur. And so it opens up a whole can of worms, because Wur was initially saying his whole story is like he doesn't talk about his past, but it kind of makes it seem like he was disowned. And then later on, in later chapters, after chapter 5, he even talks about how his father totally disowned him when he became gifted. But this note seems to say otherwise, like he's some sort of secret agent, because he mentions that Dav is under his protection. He tells an elder what to do, even though he himself is a student, apparently a child. And he says, please tell my father that he can retrieve us both at his earliest convenience.
Yeah, so
I'll explain matters to him
like
then.
his father.
So he's like expecting his dad to come get them.
Yeah, his father definitely. That means his father's got to be of some importance
and he's
like power.
And he's like planning on it. But as we know, Elder Olin's dead, so the father's never going to get this message. And so it makes I'm kind of curious how that's going to play out when we get back to Dav and Wur's journey. But basically, she reads that and she's like, "Who the piss is Torin?" And then Olin's kind of like, or not Olin, Ilseth is like, "Oh, it's never easy." And then he puts the black disc on her that creates shadows and turns her into a shadow.
Freaking A. And she's in a worse position than even the kid who was made into a shadow earlier, because there's no one there to like explain things to her and then give her money. She's just screwed.
Yeah, that's how it ends. At this point, we don't know what really happens to her. So it seems like he's covering up his tracks, I think, at this point.
Yeah, and that's where
it makes it very it makes it seem like he's the one that killed everyone, because he's so desperate to keep Dav a secret, and he's thinking that everyone here in this school knew that Dav knew that he couldn't use essence, and maybe they'll put 2 and 2 together, and like he disappears, and they'll look for him. So if I need to kill everyone here needs to die, and because there's nothing that prevents the gifted from using the essence against other gifted.
Yeah. And
they even say that when they grab her, they're like, "You're obviously gifted, because if you weren't, the first tenant would have prevented us from using essence on you." And so, I don't know. There's a lot of implications. Like maybe there's something going on. Like either they're super desperate to keep a secret, or they're actually more wicked and they want the augurs to come back and retake over the world so they can rule evilly again. I don't know. But
Yeah, because actually they did one thing that just made me. After this happened, I started thinking like, oh, maybe the augurs aren't so good. Maybe Ilseth is trying to do something. Maybe the augurs in the past aren't so good, and Ilseth is trying to bring back an old way of leadership that is not so good. Because again, we don't know what the details of this little war was. If the maybe things were like switched around, maybe the gifted were super oppressive of the regular people, and that's why they hate the gifted so much. Son of a frick.
I think it does mention that. I think it talks about how the gifted were essentially given free reign to use essence however they wanted to enforce the augurs, and the augurs didn't really care. And so that kind of power will corrupt people.
Right.
So yeah, that's where we're at with the story now. Like I said, I think this is a lot of potential. I'm really looking forward. I've actually already read up to chapter 10, but we're not covering quite that many episodes, or that many chapters in this episode. But anyway, any last thoughts, things to add?
I do have one prediction, I think. Just a small one that will most likely get answered in the next few chapters. Maybe you already even know. But I think Dav and Wur are walking into a sort of trap. I think it's too easy when Ilseth explained, like, oh, this little box is for you. It'll tell you what to do. I don't know how to use it. I don't know what to do. Like, it's just like, oh, uh-huh. Especially after, we see these chapters. He turns Asha into a shadow so quick to cover his own tracks. Like, I'm kind of thinking, like, that maybe Dav will arrive to wherever he's supposed to go, and this box will help whoever is out there to trap him, and maybe they're going to force him to do something or be studied. I don't know, but
I guess we'll see.
Yes.
So thanks for joining us this week and Into the Pages. Next week, we'll have more for you. Bye. So